Picture this. You're living your quiet life when the notorious HOA Queen, Karen Sterling, storms across your driveway, waving papers and screaming about a $6,500 fine for violating her rules. You didn't even live in her neighborhood. Cameras flash. Neighbors peek nervously. She threatens to drag you to court, promising she'll make you pay by any means necessary. But here's the twist: you're ready. Every email, every letter, every fraudulent claim she ever made is documented. You've got the proof to expose her. The question is, will she intimidate the court? Or will the tables turn in less than 3 minutes? Stay tuned, because this showdown is about to get intense. It all started with a letter. A crisp envelope, stamped with the HOA logo, landed on my doorstep. Inside, a $6,500 fine claiming I violated HOA rules. My first reaction: laugh. Karen Stern, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, had crossed the line. Over the years, she'd intimidated neighbors with fines, warnings, and absurd community standards. But now, she had picked the wrong target. The next morning, she appeared at my door, clipboard in hand. Her face red with anger. "You can't live here. You're violating our OWL rules," she shouted, her voice echoing down the quiet street. I leaned against the door frame calmly. "Karen, this property is outside your HOA jurisdiction. I suggest you check the property maps before wasting your time." Her jaw tightened. "Maps? You'll see you'll regret this. I'll make you pay every penny." I smiled. "If it's a court matter, I suggest you prepare. I've documented everything: letters, emails, fines, even your own board's complicity." She froze for a fraction of a second, then her face twisted into fury. "This isn't over. I'll sue you. You'll wish you never moved here." Over the next week, the harassment escalated. AA members parked near my property, snapping photos of my home and landscaping. Flyers labeled "Unapproved Occupant" were shoved under my door. Trash bins were overturned. And all the while, Karen maintained her self-proclaimed authority, acting as if she owned the entire neighborhood. But I was ready. I had meticulously documented every interaction, every note, every violation she had fabricated, every fraudulent claim, every intimidation tactic, all recorded. Then came a day she filed the lawsuit. Walking into the courthouse, Karen radiated confidence, expecting the judge to side with her. Cameras flashed. Reporters murmured. Neighbors craned their necks to see the infamous O Queen in action. I stepped forward, calm, collected, files in hand. The courtroom was tense. Every eye was on us. Karen waved her papers dramatically. "This is a clear violation. He owes thousands in fines for HOA breaches," she barked. I placed my files on the table and addressed the judge. "Your Honor, these claims are fraudulent. My property lies outside the boundaries. Here are rent records, property deeds, emails, and official documents proving the HOA's harassment and illegal fines." The judge adjusted his glasses, scanning the evidence. "M. Sterling, do you wish to respond?" Karen sputtered. "Objection. This is slander." "Hey, I interjected calmly. "Your Honor, the evidence is factual. This isn't slander. These are documented actions taken by Ms. Sterling and her board to intimidate me for property I legally own outside their jurisdiction." For the first time, Karen faltered. Her confident smirk vanished. The courtroom held its breath. 3 minutes later, after presenting the final proof of rent records and fraudulent HA fines, the judge slammed the gavel. Case dismissed. HOA claims null and void. Defendant awarded costs. The room erupted in whispers, cameras clicked, and neighbors who had suffered under Karen's reign of terror finally felt relief. Karen's face turned pale. Her empire of intimidation had collapsed in less than 3 minutes of court testimony. As I walked out of the courtroom, sunlight streaming on my face, I realized something. This wasn't just about me. It was about standing up to someone who thought fear and authority could control others. It was about showing that documentation, patience, and the law always win over arrogance and threats. She thought she could intimidate everyone, but she forgot one thing. The truth always finds a way. The morning after the lawsuit was filed, the neighborhood was buzzing. Whispers spread like wildfire. Karen Sterling, the so-called queen of the HOA, had officially tried to drag me into court for living outside her control. And people were watching closely. I arrived at the courthouse early, files in hand, reviewing every detail one last time. Emails, photos, rent records, everything meticulously organized. I knew she was counting on theatrics, on intimidation, on the fear she had instilled in the community for years. But I wasn't afraid. Karen arrived shortly after, her heels clicking against the marble floor, clipboard raised like a shield. Her expression was a mix of fury and disbelief. You think you can just defy these HOA? I've built this community. I've kept it in order. She yelled at no one in particular, her voice echoing through the empty corridors. I remained calm. Order isn't about control, Karen. It's about law. And the law is on my side. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Reporters lined the benches, cameras flicked on, and neighbors craned their necks to see the infamous HOA queen in action. Karen stepped forward, dramatically spreading her papers across the judge's bench. Your Honor, this property is under HOA jurisdiction. He's violating every standard. We demand fines, penalties, and enforcement, she proclaimed, her voice cracking with emotion. I stood calmly, placing my own organized files on the table. Your Honor, the property is clearly outside HO boundaries. I've provided rent records, official deeds, emails, and photographs demonstrating Ms. Sterling's harassment and fraudulent fines. These are not claims. These are documented facts. The judge raised an eyebrow. M. Sterling, your evidence. Karen stammered. Objection. These are irrelevant. Hey he. I cut in smoothly. Here pertains directly to the claims she has made against me. This is not only relevant, it's decisive. Each claim made by the HOA against me has been fabricated or applied outside their jurisdiction. The room went silent. Even Karen's board members looked uneasy. Realizing their loyalty to her now exposed them to scrutiny. I continued, flipping through pages. Here are emails where the HOA demanded fines for landscaping, trash cans, and mailbox placements, all outside their legal authority. Here are rent records proving my property ownership and residency. And finally, here are notes and photographs documenting harassment, intimidation, and defamation by the HOA under Ms. Sterling's direction. Karen's face turned bright red, veins visible on her temples. This can't be. You're lying. One of the court clerks passed me a file of HA internal communications. Your Honor, I said, this proves intent to intimidate and defraud. It's not just a violation of HOA rules. It's harassment and fraudulent enforcement. The judge leaned back, adjusting his glasses. M. Sterling, do you have any evidence refuting these claims? Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. Her confident facade faltered. Every argument she tried to make crumbled under the weight of documented proof. The room held its breath as the judge reviewed the final pieces of evidence. 3 minutes into my testimony, the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Cameras clicked, neighbors whispered, scribbled notes furiously. Karen's eyes darted around, realizing for the first time that she had been exposed. Case dismissed. The judge declared, his gavel echoing loudly. All fines are null and void. Defendant awarded court costs. The HOA's claims are without merit. Further attempts to harass or enforce these fraudulent fines may result in legal action against the HOA and its officers. Karen's hands shook. You can't. This isn't over, she screamed. The bailiff stepped forward. Mom, you're under warning for harassment and fraud. Any further violations will result in criminal charges. Outside the courtroom, the neighborhood erupted in excitement. Neighbors I had never spoken to came forward, shaking my hand. We've all been afraid of her, one said quietly. Once you showed us that the truth matters more than fear. I nodded. This wasn't just about me. It's about showing that intimidation and control don't work when facts, law, and patience guide your actions. Karen, escorted out by court officers, glared at the crowd, realizing her empire of fear had collapsed. Her board members quietly resigned, muttering apologies as they left. Walking home, I felt the weight of months of harassment lift off my shoulders. The community, once silenced, now looked at me with admiration. Children played freely outside, and neighbors no longer whispered in fear of fines or threats. She believed that intimidation could control an entire community. But she forgot one fundamental truth. Preparation, evidence, and patience always triumph over arrogance. The courtroom had emptied, but the echoes of that gable still rang in everyone's minds. Karen Sterling, once untouchable in the neighborhood, sat in stunned silence, her clipboard now useless. Her threats dissolved into thin air. For the first time she wasn't in control. I stepped outside into the late afternoon sunlight, breathing deeply. The air felt lighter, cleaner, almost celebratory. Neighbors approached cautiously at first, then with growing enthusiasm. "You did it," one woman said, tears brimming. Finally, someone stood up to her. "I just did what anyone should do," I replied. "Document everything, know your rights, and stand firm. That's all it takes." A word spread quickly. The local news crew that had covered the trial returned to interview neighbors and witnesses. Cameras rolled, capturing reactions of relief, astonishment, and, most importantly, vindication. Karen's HOA, once feared for its aggressive tactics, was officially exposed. Fraudulent fines, intimidation campaigns, and harassment claims were all now public knowledge. Karen herself refused interviews. She sat in a corner, red-faced, muttering under her breath, her aura of authority shattered. Her board members had quietly resigned, leaving her isolated, powerless. For months, she had controlled this community with fear and paperwork. But now, her empire had collapsed in a matter of minutes in court. Later that evening, I returned home to my property. Children ran along the sidewalks, playing freely. The street, which had once been filled with whispers and sideways glances, now felt alive with a renewed sense of safety and community. I walked through my front door and found my spouse already waiting, smiling knowingly. "Well," they asked. I shrugged, still catching my breath. "She's done. The HOA has been exposed. The fines are null, and any further harassment could land her in real legal trouble. She needed to learn that control ends when the law begins." My spouse replied, pouring a cup of coffee. Over the next few weeks, the fallout from the trial reshaped the neighborhood. Neighbors who had once lived in fear of fines and penalties approached me, sharing stories of their own encounters with Karen and the HOA's overreach. They expressed relief, gratitude, and even admiration for standing firm. The HOA's email accounts, records, and board minutes became public, revealing just how deep the fraudulent operations ran. Community members realized how much intimidation they had quietly endured. But now, the power dynamic had shifted. Fear no longer ruled the street. Justice did. Karen, meanwhile, faced multiple civil actions for harassment and attempted fraud. Her name became synonymous with abuse of HOA power, a cautionary tale for other communities. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. She had tried to enforce control beyond her legal reach, and ended up losing everything. Even now, I remember the exact moment in court when the tide turned. Karen's confident smirk had faded the moment the judge reviewed the evidence. Her threats, once terrifying, became meaningless. And the community watched, silent, as the law, not fear, prevailed. By the end of the week, life returned to a peaceful rhythm. Children played by the sidewalks and parks. Neighbors chatted across fences. The oppressive aura that Karen once maintained had vanished. I spent evenings tending to my garden, enjoying the quiet freedom that comes from knowing you've stood for what's right. As I sat on the porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the trees, I reflected on the events. Justice doesn't always arrive dramatically, but when it does, it leaves a lasting impact. Karen thought she could intimidate her way through life, but she forgot a simple truth: preparation, patience, and knowing your rights can dismantle even the most feared oppressor. Cinematic closing thought. She thought she could control a neighborhood with threats and fines, but she forgot that courage, evidence, and the law are far stronger than any clipboard or rulebook. The neighborhood breathed again. Children laughed. Neighbors smiled. And for the first time in years, the street felt like a community rather than a battlefield. Justice had been served. And in its quiet, undeniable way, it spoke louder than Karen ever could.